it blazing. Cause I can read between the lines, I ain't blind. We unwind what they're really saying, genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics, keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid, you're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
So we, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. This is your Sunday night edition of Rogue Ways, and we will have Michael Wann here any second. I just wanted to come on and chat with you guys so you knew that we were doing this thing and that Michael's just running a few minutes behind. So in the meantime, while we are waiting for him, I just realized that I didn't update the stream title, and so it probably says some other weird stuff and not Michael Wann, but this is, in fact, an episode with Michael Wann, so hold tight for that. Should be any second. But in the meantime, I like to tell you about some things, like my site, CoreySharman.com. It's also rogueways.org. You can type in either and it will bring you to this page. There's years worth of accumulated poetry, articles, various musings and things. You can navigate it through this noosphere set of tags down here if you'd like, or some other ways. However you like to navigate, you can do it. You can link to my subscribe star from here. You can see old episodes of Rogue Ways, the audio at least. You can check out my books that I have published. The Sine Curve of Aeons, Vitalis, is a fictional novel which is just about to get its sequel in print. So wait for it. You can get that in a hardcover too. This is a story that covers aeons and civilizations and the rise and fall of golden ages and dark ages and humanity's progress through those collapses and rebirths. I also have a Gypsy on the Res, my memoir. It's irreverent, it's funny, it's deep, it's thoughtful, and it is a tragedy. So check those out. And there's also a poetry book. You can get a tarot reading from yours truly. My tarot readings are protected and safe, and they tap into the highest self of you and your spiritual allies to give you whatever messages and insights you have been seeking, or the ones you didn't know you were seeking but needed to hear. Just depends on what your highest self has in store for you. So if you would like a tarot reading, 20 years of experience behind that, and you can check that out. You can also go to the shop. I've been hearing the Rogue Ways gear is a little bit behind. The third-party company that I use to do this stuff is just like everyone else, dealing with people not showing up to work and China being China and just the economy slowing down. So things are a little bit slow. So if you do order, or you have ordered and are wondering where that's at, it should be coming. It's just a little bit slower than normal. I have Organite jewelry that I have created myself. They are one-of-a-kind pieces. There are a few left. You can also check out classes that I teach if you want to learn more, especially about our spiritual paths and abilities. And of course, there's Irreverent merch, which is where I throw fun t-shirt ideas that we think of in the course of Rogue Ways. So you can go check that out as well. I like to log out before I show you my subscribe star, but this is my subscribe star. This is my favorite way to be supported by you, the fans, the people who find value in Rogue Ways. And if you have found value in Rogue Ways, then it is awesome. If you want to share some value back, I really appreciate it. I pour my heart and soul into this show because I love it. But it is nice when people recognize the value that they've gotten from it over the years and decide to support me in this way. This is a monthly subscription site. If you do it at the dollar level, anyone can afford that. That's a great idea. And hopefully you find some value in the higher levels. There's different perks for each, so you come check that out. There's also a one-day trust period. That means you can get everything on here for free, honestly. But hopefully if you do that, you feel like kicking me a little bit to balance that out. So that is what I'm showing you today, and it shows me that Michael is here now. So I'm going to say what's up to Awesome Beach in the chat and a few other people watching, and let's get Michael in here and start this thing off. I think he's coming. Michael, are you there? If you can hear me, I just see a black screen with your name on it. I don't see you, and I don't hear you. You may have to mess with your settings and see what you can do. Yes, Austin, order that police state shirt. That shirt is rad. A couple people have ordered it too. I don't know who it is. What's up, Shell Owens? And what's up, Digital Apparition in the chat? Michael, I can see you. And I can hear you. Woohoo!
All right. I apologize about my tardiness.
No worries. We are ready. Well, I'm going to start with my normal introduction and we'll just roll from there. How does that work?
That sounds perfect. So
excellent.
I have the headphones in, but yes. I'm hearing you through the speaker. So I don't know if what you're I'm concerned for your audio. I'm in a different place now, so the acoustics are going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
Different. So
well, I can hear
hopefully
you fine.
This is better.
And if anybody
did you hear me fine?
Sorry, if anybody in the chat can't hear, let us know. But I think so far it's good. Yeah, the last episode I could hear you fine, but then afterwards I'm listening back and you were like really quiet, and there was a lot of people who, you know, live no one said any that there was a problem, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, but afterwards when they were playing it through YouTube, they were like, no, you can't hear Michael. And I'm like, I don't know, man. None of this stuff can be explained. So like,
yeah.
If you can hear it live, why wouldn't you be able to hear it in the replay? But I don't know. Shell says she can hear us both very well. So we'll just move forward, and I will say, sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Always, it is good to have friends visit us, and tonight is no exception for his 5th one-on-one interview on Rogue Ways, and perhaps his 10th time on the show in general, I think. The master of magical synchronicity, the weaver of intricate threads lost to history and the mass mind, and the alchemist, astrologer who wanders the world in wisps of wonder, Michael Wann is back once again to regale us with tales of radness. Last we talked with Michael, it was at the start of his journey to reclaim a church, and it was Mother's Day. And now he is bringing that church reclamation to a close, and it's Father's Day. So that's fun. Life conspires to make us ponder and laugh in these ways. So, Michael, thank you for returning to us full circle. It is good to have you tonight.
Well, first of all, thank you for that that wonderful introduction. You do that well. It's fun to hear that.
Thank you.
A little bit embarrassing. It's like when you hear someone talk about you like that, but.
But I like to start off by embarrassing everyone, so we're on equal.
I think you do. So, but it's done in this fun way. It's done in a fun way. So it's I'm excited for this call. It's been this conversation because what a ride we've been going on, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it's like I think it's nice to kind of circle back and kind of reflect on what's been going on. So
yeah.
I'm excited for where this might unfold.
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly what was going on in the world last time we talked, except, I mean, clearly the, corona, whatever nonsense was going on, but I don't think any of this sort of racial tension or rioting or things had broken out yet. So I don't think we had reached that stage of 2020 yet.
No, not at all. Well, before we get into that, because my favorite thing about coming here is the how do you pose it? The senseless question? The pointless question. What's the pointless question?
The
Let's start with
pointless question. Thank you for bringing it to that. The pointless question is, I was going to ask you what your favorite tactile sensation is.
My favorite tactile sensation. How about this? I don't know if I can say my favorite because I think that changes upon the moment to moment. But I will tell you something I touch a lot, and I just so happen to be holding it right now.
Wow.
So this is a stone. This is the shape. Can you see how perfectly round this is?
Yeah, it's exceptionally round.
Yeah, so it's like, that's why I picked it up, and this is a river stone. So what I did was, I love to work with stones and like something which is in a natural state, and then just kind of like play with it. So I had a disc of I think this is labradorite. So just like a slice of labradorite, and labradorite is when it's polished, it's got like all of these, like when you see it at first, like it appears to be kind of like a flat, shiny, mirrored reflection. But then when you move it, like you see all of these greens and these blues, and it's like, oh, you don't see that at first. And the more you move it, the more shapes and like, so it's generally like it literally is like being able to see things differently. And so I attached it to the stone, And I created this process where you just use like wood glue and sand. And so you go and I like to collect sand if ever I go to a beach, and people send
Awesome.
me sand because they know I collect sand, and that's gotten cool. So I got
That
this
is
real
cool.
interesting collection of sand from all over, and then I'll go and I build this like I like almost sculpt layer by layer of just
Yeah.
like glue and sand. And I like to turn them into eyes, and I've done them in on different stones, but this is the only one which has been perfectly round.
Wow.
And and it's the texture, and that's what the lead up to this all of that introduction is. It's
Yeah.
like when it comes down to it, like I want this to be something you're going to want to touch.
Yeah.
And so the texture of the sand, it almost dries like a concrete, like it's that hard. But then you can make layers, and I make these bumps, and
Yeah.
so you can't really see by looking at the camera, but like they're raised and they're like different levels, and then they're all painted. That you may be able to see on the
Yeah.
camera, like the different colors. And so, like, this is a dragon's eye. So, like, I'm
Wow.
playing with it because we're playing symbolically, but we're like, that's the cool thing about like any type of like art form is like it has some degree of staying power.
Yeah.
And so, like something like this, which is sculpture, it's like that's got real staying power. So it's like a real strong symbol. And so it's like this seeing this thing in this like, to me, this is like a dragon's eye. I've
Yeah.
been I read to my sons. I'm reading to them the end of a series of books about dragons and dragon riders, and it's like if you could read into it, like the story's fascinating, but like that's kind of like from that sort of
Huh.
magical fictional world. Like I created this, but it's got a labradorite, and like how the hell did this get this circular
Yeah.
stone? It's got these great textures, and all of them feel completely different. Like this feels very different, like it's smooth but it's solid, and this center where the pupil where you see the labradorite, like that's smooth in a glass way, and then you've got all of these bumps, and so it's like it's textures like that. That's what I want to feel, is like a contrast of textures that that like are satisfying to touch, but then there's a real subtlety also in terms of like how you can sense the different qualities of each of the surfaces. So
That's so awesome. I feel like this is one of the many times where people listening might think that we somehow like arranged this ahead of time, and I don't think you and I have even talked for at least a couple of weeks, you know. So we
no,
definitely didn't
yeah,
arrange that
exactly.
ahead of time. That was just total chance. But I also like that as you're explaining it, when I first see it, I'm like, it's an eye on a rock. And then as you're explaining it, now I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can't unsee the dragon eye. So now it is a dragon eye for me,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean,
That's awesome.
that's half of like that's like, I mean, all people who create, like, I mean, you create. It's like, you are you're working with natural magic, and
Yes.
you could bring even more, like, depending upon how you define magic and define your practice, like, you can make it, you can do all sorts of things on that realm, to various degrees. And so it's like part of it is like, going and being able to tell that story, like, um you want to hook, like when you want to pull into something, and that's what you do is in like in performance. It's the same
Yes.
thing which we're seeing happen on the world stage, but it's like you want to hook as many textures as you can, and like you can't touch what you're seeing through your TV screen, but they're trying to make you touch that, like through experience.
Yes. I
How's
love
that for a segue?
I love how that all fit together and was perfect, and you just happened to be holding that in your hand and segued into that. But well, yeah, do you want to go straight into what is happening now, or do you want to catch us up on what has been happening with you since last we talked?
Yeah, let's go that. Let's be
Okay.
personal. So this is what happened. So I was like running late. I was like all like kind of hectic today. Today was like, I had my boys over, and like, there's the Father's Day, and
Yeah,
I had like
happy
my
Father's Day.
father. I've got all of that sort. Thank you. But it's like within my tradition, if you will, like Father's Day comes with a lot of like it comes with a history, like forward and backwards. And so you couple that natural day, like couple in light of yesterday, like what happened in the heavens. Not only was it like solstice-y, it was eclipse-y,
Yeah.
but then so those are in the exact same places in the heavens, so those are two like uncommon events, and they happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Time doesn't matter, timing matters. What events happen relative to the others? So happening at the same time, like, that's a big deal. But they also were lined up to something which is known as the North Node and the South Node.
Really?
And these are like placements in the heavens. They're not like physical material sort of things. They're like abstract ideas, and it has to do with like a certain alignment of earth, sun, and moon. And so if you think about those as like primordial energies, like it's like the North Node and South Node, they're always opposite from one another. They're like about destiny of like, the sun and the moon and earth like lining up, like that's what it is. So the eclipse, the solstice, the lined up on the North Node on Father's Day, on the culmination of these last 60 days. So like, this is a heightened time. So all that's in the air. That was built up. Like, so like today I'm like feeling all that sort of stuff. And so it's like, I thought I had more time when I'm coming back to the house. I'm like, I know that Lindsay starts at 9. So it's all this sort of stuff. And I go and I realize like I'm a couple of minutes late, and I go and I set this up, and I never like going on to Zoom. Like, that's just, it's Zoom,
Yeah.
we're going into it. And I'm about to do that. I'm like, wait, this is like, I'm literally like running late. I got all this stuff. I'm like, wait, stop. You need to grab the dragon's eye.
Wow.
I went and I grabbed the dragon's eye, and I literally hopped on, and like all the Zoom stuff, I'm just holding it like this. Like, I'm just holding it,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're like, tell me the tactile, and I set you up.
Yeah,
I say like, what's the question? What's the question?
Because I was going to roll right past it. I was like, oh, we're already into this. Let's just keep going.
And it's the thing I'm holding in the hand. So I want that. Let's use this as like bookends. Let's use this as bookends, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff which is going on in the world.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is this bookends. Like, this is also happening in the world. Like, this is like the level of how things are synchronizing, like just like in these small, subtle ways. But life is made of small, subtle things.
Yes.
And so if it happens like this, and it's like, this is not unique to me and you, this is unique to what we are in alignment with, which every single person is to, particularly who's watching us right now. Like, I mean, by definition, you wouldn't be watching it.
Yes.
Even if you're trolling and watching it, you're still part of it. Like,
True.
this is something which is happening. And so we're undoubtedly going to, I've been using this analogy for a long time. Like, culture got on this roller coaster right after 1945, and it starts off slow, and the next thing you know, it's like these hairpin turns and these flips. You're like, did I sign up for this?
Yeah.
And this is over the culture. And then I'm like, 9/11 is when we went into like the cave. Like, now it's dark. Now you're like, holy shit. But like, whatever would be even darker or more confusing like than that. Like, I've been watching this stuff. We've all been watching this stuff for a while now. Like, this is uncommon. And so this is what it looks like and it feels like, and in some ways it's going to be unsettling, but the underlying is this, like, there's this structure. There's this fun structure, which is really making the things that matter. Why this is the thing that matters, I don't know, but it's at the level where this matters. We're finding this, like, this natural, like, one step at a time unfolding, like, and this is just us glimpsing what's always there. Just, it's not always so in your face, I suppose, like on a high stage like we're doing right now.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to me too, and maybe this will play into what we're talking about tonight or not, but at the very least it touches on what you just were talking about. And it's this a couple episodes ago, I just did I was like, I don't really have anything to specifically bring up that I haven't already brought up, and but I want to get on and just say hi to people. And so I'm going to read this random poem that I just like popped out with today. I'm going to do this like God shot from this symbols book, and I'm going to, pull out a random tarot card, and I'm just going to kind of whatever, see what happens. Well, they all perfectly, of course, lined up and told this story of how right now we're in this time of excessive polarity. And
Mm-hmm.
that excessive polarity is actually going to serve this purpose where, like, when it stretches as tight as it can, it's like as divided as it can be, it like will snap and come back together and create this unity. And there's all of this, you know, creative power in that moment. But the underlying sort of warning was like, if you don't navigate that, then you're going to allow all of that sort of energy to be used by the people who are manipulating things. And I was like, what a fucking crazy episode to just like pull out randomly with no plan. But that's how things work, right?
So I would say that's exactly what's happening. And there's like a there's like I'm trying to think of like how I want to describe this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's undoubtedly there's like this force, you know, which is accelerating it, pulling it out, but it's folding in upon itself.
Yeah.
And it's almost creating like like we don't have words to describe it. Like, I mean, it's that's why I'm hesitant, because like I don't want to be so limiting in describing it. But yes, like there's this thing that's happening right now, and we could all witness it, and we can identify the different things, and we know to kind of like we're walking through the same thing it's walking with, and we're walking with the same energy. So there's a danger with that.
Yeah.
And there's also, that's where all of that's where the fissures exist for what the next right steps are going to look like.
Yeah.
Maybe we do jump right into it. Can we jump right into
Yeah,
it?
let's do it.
All right. So this has been on my so it's airlines. All right. So like right after like the whole the virus story hits, I read this article like in New York Times about like airline flying, and it was just like the worst thing. And I think we talked about airline flying once before. And so, you know, airline flying is on my radar. So about a week ago, I think it was, like there was all of this like kind of like in the background of the airlines are coming together, and they're saying like, yeah, we need we're going to have an immunity passport. We're all agreeing like we need a national immunity passport, and then we can open up the airlines. If we get the immunity, you know, same thing. And you see that. And you know, it's par for the course, obviously. But what caught my attention was the responses, which I was reading, like, you know, the commentary to that. And it was like this, it was this aware group, obviously aware group. They're following, they're seeing what's happening, but they're like, you know, they can't take, you know, they're going to take our airline. And it's like part of what's going to happen, what's going to have to happen, or what is happening, but it's going to get more and more intense, is it's going to be very, very clear what their world is. And we always remember their world is an inversion of something true.
Yeah.
In every way. And we, by being born into it, like there's so many things that like are just ingrained within us that we don't even realize that how ingrained we are. Like it's very easy to spot it. So like one example is like the airline industry. And like the truth of the matter is, it ain't yours, it ain't mine. Like I like to fly, and that's not mine. In fact, I know it's not good for me. Like it's like apparently like being in an airplane is like the most like worst thing to the human thing, like radiation wise. And maybe you're like, well, this is where you eradicate, like whatever, like it's something. And like, I don't like the shit that comes out of it. So it's like, but I do like to travel, and I like to travel easily. And it used to be actually fun to travel. But regardless, it's like, you know what, they're making it obvious to me that that's not going to be a game I'm going to play, and I'm not happy about it. But there's this like, there's going to be something else.
Yeah.
And like we sense it, and it's like when you're saying that snap together, I don't know what that is, but each of us are going to be faced with this in our own unique experience, like, you know, what we are as individuals, because this is a collective time, but it's an individual time. So it's like we're all going through the same sort of stuff to various degrees, and it's going to be unique to the story. So that's where the danger lies of like people getting pulled in. But it's also like the lies of like, oh, like I recognize where I've been, you know, because I'm re-examining things. And so as one lives their life true to whatever they're dealing with, like these small synchronicities will begin to show itself more and more as this other thing is shutting down. And so this is like ultimately like the act of faith.
Yes.
Like this is like, you need faith because your other option is fighting against something which like that's what it wants. That's what it wants. And you know in your heart of hearts, like when you think about it, like not just in your heart of hearts, but in your logical mind, when you deduce what the airline industry is, what computers are, there's going to be a point that we will say, I will never use a lot. Like, damn it.
True.
Like this is how I connect to people, but I can't do this because it's affecting me that obviously.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally with you.
And so it's like, obviously I'm not there because I'm on this computer, but I'm trying to make it less and less. And so the point is like, we're going to begin to somehow like, we're going to walk through it. And this is what it looks like walking through it. And it's through synchronicities, and it's recognizing the magic in life.
No, I love it. It's absolutely, you're right. And it's hard to explain why, but it's like, I know for now, this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. There's some people out there, there's you and I need this for whatever reason, this is still needed, but there is going to be that time where maybe you could argue it would still be needed, but there's going to be less, it's not going to be worth what it is costing us to do it. And so we're going to have to walk away from it. And that, synchronistic sort of path that you can travel in life, it does take a lot of faith. Like you can't just, especially because the world tells you you're crazy if you follow these, signs and things that you can't explain. Like if people ask me to explain exactly why I, gave up my career, sold my house, and like drove around the continent in a van and ended up where I'm at now in a totally different life, I could I could tell you the things, but they wouldn't sound very sane to you, but if you were there living them, you would understand the sort of like way that happens. But having that much faith in those that you follow them is its whole own sort of demon to slay, right? Because that self-doubt is going to try to convince you to go a different way.
I mean, there are a couple ways to unpack that. I mean, it's like, yes, like, and that's been what's the word I'm looking for? Like really like, exposed and like brought the worst qualities of that on a large cultural level has been like really brought out in everyone who was raised in this culture. So it was like, we were like all the human experience is always like an intense experience. Like, you go and look at old literature, like those motherfuckers were going through some shit.
Yeah.
Like they were feeling deeply. And then you're like, okay, that's part of the human experience. And then you begin to recognize, like just through your own timeline, like, there are times of intensity and undoubtedly like now is that intense time.
Yeah.
But that is also the path to everyone's like, what you learn through understanding your journey, like what is in front of your face right now is like, this is walking. I'm sorry. I want to go back to where we were originally going with this. By following true to that, and then you recognize that you have to walk away from this stuff, and there's all of this like concern, but that you're walking away from it. What you have or this faith is what we're saying for like this knowledge base now of like, okay, I'm looking for it. But the snap together, which we're talking about, and like the joy of this experience, because it
exists.
It's the coming together is we've already connected. Like the connections will find themselves again. Like everything that we think we're walking away from is actually like, no, this is the best thing for us. And all of the good from that, what we learned, like the ability to understand what it's like to travel, what that experience is like. The world is changing. We know that for a fact. And there is a immense amount of pull into a certain expression of that in this like computer, uncomfortable, authoritarian way. But we've also are witnessing the only option you have is to walk away from that, is to begin to go on this higher kind of more like what they call magical. The fact that we have to put quotes around a word because they've not given us a word to describe it in a way that we all universally recognize as the highest path. That's our only option. Otherwise, you're like, okay, I'm just going to go, I'm going to go down that. I know where that path is leading me.
Mm.
And there's a truth to that. There's some people are going to go and say, like, you know what? I'm going to go down this path, and I'm going to go at least knowingly.
Yeah.
But for those who don't, though it's going to be perilous for some time, uncomfortable. I think uncomfortable is really the right word, is there's something happening.
I'd rather know. There's like this kid I'm working with lately, and he's like keeps describing this teacher that he really loves, and this teacher would always say, you know, if there was some sort of game show, let's say you won a prize, and they were like, here, you can have like $10 billion or this box, whatever's in this box. He's like, I'd choose the box every time. He's like, because I have to know what's in the box. And I'm like, I think I'm that person too. Like, I just need to know. Like, the path that I already know is like, okay, well, I already know that, right? But like, what's in the box? I want to know what's in the box.
So how do you know what's in the box?
You have to choose it and open it, and you just, you know, you're gonna give up all those things that you knew, and they might have been nice things, and they might have been comfortable things. And so what if nothing's in the box? Well, now you have nothing. Right? But what if what's in the box is like, I don't know, the infinite wish machine or something, right? Like, you can't know
So
until you go.
have you noticed this in the last, I mean, easily, I would say the last 3 months, but it seems to be, I'm either having more awareness of it or it's happening more frequently, like the ease of life lining up for like whatever I need to, like whoever I need to go and find and see, or whatever I need to do, like it's been lining up like really, really easily. Maybe not in the way I thought it would, but like everything's like lining up. And like,
Yes. Yes.
and that's what I think that's part of what is unfolding before us. That's happening for me, and it's happening for a whole bunch of people. Like, I'm witnessing people's lives, and I'm not seeing it for everyone. I thought that I was going to see it for everyone. I don't know. We're unfolding the box in real time.
Yeah.
We're opening the box, and so part of what I'm seeing along with this synchronicity, and this is one and the same thing, is like, that's what I mean by navigation. It's like, it's lining up. It really is effortlessly lining up. And so like a lot of the mental energy, which has gone to like forcing something to happen, that can be released.
Absolutely.
And that's being really aggravated if you are going to follow the mainstream. Like, you can almost just say, like, look at the mainstream story and let me do the opposite.
Yeah. No, for real.
So I'm going to show you the next textile piece. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Can you read what's on it? Yeah. So can you see it sideways?
Yeah.
And get an idea of the texture? So if you look at it, it's like it's a stone, and there are these other stones on it. It's painted green, and then there's like a river going down the middle. It says Susquehanna Alchemy on it, and so that's a really, in my opinion, it's a pretty accurate depiction of the shape of the river. And so this is a river stone. So I'm taking the actual river stone and I'm painting a picture of the big river. Like, this is a microcosm of this thing I'm painting, and I'm painting whatever like the human experience is. So whatever the human or the human artistic expression is, like, you know, I'm tapped into that. Like, well, there's infinite ways of doing that, and there's logic. I'm like, oh, I'm making it like this, and these stones right here, they're like the Appalachians, this ancient mountain range that the river goes through it. So those stones are that. So I've got like the symbol of all that. And I wrote the word Susquehanna Alchemy. I did the same sort of sand technique. It's coated with sand, and that's how the letters are made. Like, you go and you paint the letters, sprinkle the sand, and like with the toothpick, you can like, and then you go and you paint it. It's this really, really cool texture. It's this fantastic medium, simple to use. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is I've really seen in a dramatic way, and I kind of like to share the story over the past like 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 years, of how this like bizarre way of life just handing me this really interesting, like, this is the next step, and there's no way you could plan it.
Yeah.
And so the most recent example of that was when we met, whatever that was, 45 days ago, maybe.
Yes.
So this church opportunity appears in my life at this really intense time. Like, and it was the perfect timing, like both in my personal life and in the collective life. And it's like it was so perfect. And that has just been the latest in this series of, for me at least, of like living experiences I've had over the last 5 years. Like these like perfect scenarios have just effortlessly showed themselves with me. And I share that as an example. Like at the same time as when I really started getting into the research of the Susquehanna River. And one of the reasons why the research kind of flowed, I don't know which begat what, but I began making art of the river. And that was just true for me. Like as many ways as I could express it, I was expressing it, and it was like it was a fun, joyful way. Like to be creative is always like there should be a sense of joy and torture involved with it.
Yes.
If you're not tortured, you're not doing it right, and if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. Also, so anyway, the point I'm trying to make is like that was kind of like my way of relating to this ancient river, which was true to me. Like I'm not like a big ritual guy, but this is my ritual. Like, you know, like I'm not a big ceremony guy, but this is my ceremony. And that was my authenticity with this river, which just happened to be like the oldest river in the story came through. And I also indicate in the beginning of the story of just like how life has been more and more like in every way, at least the basic parts of life, it's been providing itself for me in this like really beautiful sort of way. It's overlapped with this connection with flowing water. And I don't think it's just the Susquehanna. I think it's all flowing water, but every piece of water has its own flavor. And the Susquehanna has a very big flavor, which arguably everyone's connected to. But what the point I'm trying to make is as we are navigating through this time period, as we're like seeing, like, you know, you can't imagine what tomorrow holds. Like there's no vision for it in your mind other than Blade Runner. Like, you know, you maybe have a couple others, but it's like you have to hold an uncertainty, but like also you want to maybe be looking for something. And so I've experienced very much what I think is going to be the navigational path for, like, you know, we're probably all experiencing it also, but I've seen it dramatically. And I'm sharing this story because you're right when you say you need to have faith and there's that self-doubt. And I'm kind of sharing this as like, you know, this is what it looks like. In fact, I think you're probably already seeing it, but I'm also telling you this. The reason why I think it's happening dramatically is because I became connected with flowing water.
Yeah, weird.
And I did it my way. And I throw out like some other ways of like to inspire people, but I think that's part of it. Like, you know, this is what the magical life is. And in the most literal sense, in the most literal and symbolic sense, flowing water is the movement of life.
Yeah.
On the planet Earth, like, you know, get away from anything in abstract. On Earth, whatever the hell Earth is, you're on it. And if you can understand the abstract concept that life flows, that there's an unfolding of life, you can look at flowing water and you can say, I don't think there's a better example in the natural world which symbolizes what life would look like unfolding in some material form. Like, this is it. Like, this is logically it, it's symbolically it. And when those two blend are the higher mind. So this is it. It's in the literature. It's all there. Yeah. And like the reason why the ancients like connected to it, we don't have to connect with it. The ancients, you just connect to it, your truth, what feels right for you. During this time of like everything you know about life, like you're gonna have to let go of, but you're gonna also realize it prepared you for something. And you're going to have to go with the flow of life. And how you're going to learn that is not on a roller coaster. That's artificial. It's true. You could learn from it. Like airplanes are artificial, but like, you know, this is it. This is the test. You've gone through the test or school, the testing school, and this is it. Or at least this is the next version of the testing school. I don't know, but something has changed and you have to apply it.
I love this. I just recently, it's like a, there's like this like trail of synchronicities throughout your life, and then they like result in something, or seem to, and maybe that's not even the final thing, but like you're kind of like, oh, this is the thing I've been trying to like figure out or sort of like piece together all my life, and this just happened to me like 2 days ago with water, where I was like, oh, like it all makes sense now. I was like, water is like basically God, right? Like water is this infinite solvent, right? Anything can go into it and just dissolve and become sort of however you want to think of that, right? That which is very godlike. It's programmable, right? It's crystalline. It's like its own matrix. So it's like, I don't know. It's like black goo almost, right? Like we had this. I think in the water is weird episode and the black goo episode, we linked them both together in both episodes. So people can go look into that more if they want to see what I'm talking about. But it's that. And then I also, for many, many years, was like, what the fuck are ley lines? Okay, I get it. They're like energy channels and like, but like, what are they? And then finally someone was like, oh, there's always underground water channels underneath the ley lines. I'm like, so it's just fucking water flowing. Like, so I'm like, okay, so like it's always water. Like shit comes through the water into this dimension. Shit can like leave this dimension through water. It's like the infinite, presence. And all my most like powerful sort of authentic like pieces of magic, you could say, that I've done in my life have always revolved around water. The synchronicities I was just talking about that led me to this totally new life revolved around running water. So like you saying this, I'm like, this is like just literally all pieced together for me like a few days ago, and now here you are explaining it.
And I think this has never not been true. And everyone's always near running water. Like obviously life goes on.
And everyone kind of will know it if they think about it, I think.
No, yeah. Like this is like what you're describing right now is like, see, we've been educated in such a way where you were taught that you're uncertain about that inner knowing. So let's not even say the inner knowing is anything other than the fact that we can recognize all people kind of have this thing. They're like, whether you want to call it intuition, but there's something like, I just kind of know something. So imagine if you grew up in a culture where everyone in that culture, and they had a school system, and they went through and they taught you, they're like, this inner knowing is your guide stone. It's like, this is your touch point through life. And this is how you develop it so that when you go out into the world, no matter what the world shows itself, you will know how to navigate it. Right?
Right.
So we're taught the opposite. This is what the world looks like. This is how you go into the square box world. And then you go and you live your jobs and you go and you do like whatever culture is. You could go and argue and say like there's a point for that. You could say it's part of the software of the simulation we're living. I don't know what it is, but it's the is that experiences like if you're in a body. So your water analogy is fantastic also because you're mostly water.
Yeah.
You're a water being. Like as you're describing water, you're describing your physical expression. You're more than your body, but guess what? As long as you're here, it's a pretty important part of the experience.
Yeah.
Like, I talk about like a lot of these kind of like woo-woo ideas, but it's very, very real. It's very in the body. Like everything you need is inside. You have the full, once you understand that this is how you are able to navigate your interaction with life, not the life you read about on the computer, but the life you're seeing right in front of you. And then whatever, like the other ways which people who are not in this matrix as they will are able to navigate. Like we're figuring that out. These are the clues, and we're going to understand it better than anyone else because they were taught it in school, and we're like, we discovered the shit, but they're helping us, whatever this is, like that seems to be happening.
Yeah.
And this is it, and this is us like figuring it out and sharing like the stories, and like we're going somewhere because I know where we're not going.
Yeah, I'm not going to a riot. For sure. But that's like we're sitting here talking about it, and I'm sitting here imagining like, is there any way to explain to a person in a riot like how any of this really, right? Like they're so, I think, far from being like in the moment and in touch with their actual selves, like no matter what side they're on and no matter what they would like to be fighting for or against. And so I don't know how to transfer any of this to anyone who's not just already sitting here open-minded listening right now, you know, but I guess I'm not supposed to either. Otherwise it would just happen.
Yeah. So um I think it was the second time I was on the higher side chats. And I'm almost positive that's where it was, but I talked about, you know, I'm being careful with my words, but I talked about an organization which was like kind of cool in the news versus now they're very hot in the news, and I broke down how that's an ancient Babylonian king of the demons,
It's
and
yeah.
we live in an occultic ritual, and it feels normal. Like that sounds like, you know, it sounds like fantastic, but only sound it it's it it seems normal to us because there's never been a day you've not been in it. And maybe arguably you could say there never was a day that it wasn't there, but like we know that's happening. And then so the participation feels real. But once you have an awareness of like what that energy is like, and you know, you can have some, this is how you navigate around it. So like if you want to understand from maybe a deeper level of what's being in, at least what is thought to being invoked, I can't say this is happening or not because I don't go there. That's just not where I want to go right now. Like go and listen to those episodes and you're going to hear like the demonic and like the how that plays out in this occultic ritual, and you know, you decide if you want to feed that or not.
Nope. I don't want to. I already know I don't want to. It is, and it has all the trappings of a cult, and it has all of the sort of demanding of I don't know, like praise is not necessarily the right word. Subservience maybe the right word, to it, to this body and this energy, and if you're not doing that, then you are, you know, anti and you are against, and everyone will make you know it. It's like, but it's getting pretty real, and it's getting harder and harder to find, I think, people who are completely detached from it. It seems like it's catching up a lot of people right now, and it's really sad to watch. It's really disturbing, and I don't know, but it's like I'm always at this like crossroads of like, do I like go into it and try to like pull people out, or do I just stay where I'm at and hope that they like look at me waving at them or something, you know?
that that, that's a
life.
fundamentally deep question for someone who is probably like you know, looking at it from anyone in this audience, you know, yourself and myself included, of like, you know, how do I want to go and participate in what's happening right now? And I can't think of like the name. I want to say it's like a lord. I think they're called lords in Buddhism, like, you know, like a deity, but not like a supreme deity. But there's someone of some spiritual significance within Buddhism, or it's a practice, or you know, I'm doing my best to explain it.
Right.
Where there is a commitment not to leave this plane until the very last person received enlightenment.
Yeah.
So like there's like, you know, there's a lineage of that level of expression, and then there's also a lineage which is like, you know what, I'm building the ark. And so, and maybe you could do both. Like I think we're at a time right now where like I used to read about this like in like the new agey kind of like book stuff, and I exposed myself, and I used to have like kind of a like I'm familiar. Obviously, it struck a chord with me enough that I was familiar enough to become versant of a lot of different what would be thought of like new agey sort of stuff. But I was always like, I think now that I look back, now that I apply what I read years ago, and I look at the scenario that's happening, you know, it makes that those kind of storylines, because this is all storyline. A human being's a storyline. like they hold more weight, in my opinion. And so we were talking about fundamental questions, like the fundamental question, which is accredited to the Einstein character, is the most important question you ask is this a dangerous place, or is this a safe place? Is this a dangerous universe or a friendly universe? And I don't think that's a metaphysical type of description. I think that is like a programming type of question. Like, it's like, what's your experience going to be? Like, fundamentally, what are you doing? Because we're at a place where, like, we're really seeing that. As you hold more and more, like, I'm moving through this, you're seeing more and more of the synchronicities, and like life is like, despite everything collapsing, like you seem to be able to like navigate a really like harmonious, beautiful path with it. There's a truth to that, and there's also a truth, as I said before, to that like Buddhist thing. And so it's like, what do you want to do? Like, now seems to be the time where you really do get to decide how the future is going to unfold for you personally.
Yeah. I love that. I love that power of creation, and that feels to me like the sort of place you need to stand in order to use that sort of, snap back to the middle that is either already starting or coming very swiftly towards us. And for some reason, when you were talking about that, it reminded me of this like really powerful sort of meditation, or at least mental practice to ask yourself. It's called soul, and it stands for subject, object, location. And so you kind of ask yourself, you check in, you're like, what is the subject of me, right? The subject of me is not actually this body. This body is actually the object of me, and my subjective me is somewhere else as like a consciousness that's like coming through this body and sort of using it to do whatever needs to be done. But this is just the object, right? It's not really me. And so it offers this level of sort of detachment, from identifying with this body, I guess. And so you have a lot more freedom, I think, to remember what you really are, and to remember like that whatever you really came here for, like this body is like a tool for you to do that. It doesn't really matter in the end, like what happens to the body. It's just like a sleeve almost, and it's going to be cast aside, that. So like in the meantime, it's just very freeing and empowering in some level. And then the location part is to just kind of check in with like, what like universe am I really in right now? Like, what aspect of consciousness am I in right now? Am I awake? Am I sleeping? Am I like astrally traveling? Like, where am I? And it sort of like centers you and brings you to the present moment, but it also brings you to the present moment in this way that's really empowering and powerful, and reminds you that like, oh yeah, I'm this other thing. I'm not this. And that's good to remember, especially given everything that's happening, I think. Because I've talked about before, like if you are over-identified with this body and over-attached to it, there's this sort of like inability to be in the moment, but there's also this fear, I think, that comes naturally with that, and that is a weapon that can be used against you. And so the more you can kind of just like get in touch with that part of you that knows that you're not this, I think the more, in many, many ways, the more empowered you are on this plane.
Yeah. And I think that's a skill set.
Yeah.
Like, that's not just like an abstract idea. That's like a skill set. And that skill set is based upon all sorts of things. Like the most important being the inner posture, but then outer posture connect the mind, like really like the unification of mind body.
Yeah.
And so what I like to do is talk about like tools, like ultimately everything with like I show and I explain these things like this because these are just tools for navigation. And that's always been the truth for being human. But right now there's also the navigation of this transitory moment in experience. And you said like the soul questions, any type of like stopping and checking in and like disconnecting with whatever you're identifying with. And how do you do that? Like you're checking in, like, where am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yes.
Like, these aren't deep questions, but these are like, where is your mind? Where is your awareness? And that's part of like when your awareness is not like doing whatever you're doing, that's why monotonous tasks like making something like this are so like these are ways which we learn the skill sets to really develop how to navigate life. And we have all grown up in a culture which has purposefully retarded the growth within the individual, which were naturally happening. And it's very possible it was just done for a scientific experiment to see like what would happen if.
It could very well be. And it also has disconnected us as much as possible from ourselves, from each other, from our natural surroundings. And so checking back in like that also is like, oh yeah, I'm here and I'm connected, you know, and nothing can really disconnect me. And I like when you're, you know, obviously making this dragon eye, you weren't necessarily, I'm guessing, thinking about like, what good is this going to do? You know, like, how is this going to serve me? Like, what am I going to use this for? And how long am I going to hold on to it? Or any of those things. You're just kind of in the moment creating it. And in that moment, you're already, you know, creating it for yourself as this tool to use, like in this episode, for example. And so that reminds me, it connects back to this idea you were saying earlier that no matter where you kind of end up, you're going to have been prepared to be there without even knowing that you were preparing to be there. You know, you're going to end up there and be like, oh my God, everything works out this way because I've always been headed right here.
Exactly. And so the skill sets we all are developing, and we're all in like different sorts of ways of developing, or ways which we allow that to flow.
Yeah.
And so like when I make something like this, like I'm like a mad scientist. Like I'm going to put the labradorite so I can go and, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like this is to me, this is a meditation tool. This is a living symbol of a certain quality of whatever a dragon represents in a magic. And so the quality of the of how it's presented, like with the colors, and like dragons got a lot of different connotations. So I'm clear to go and say like I want a dragon of like this type.
Yeah.
And like all these things, I'm like, these are like living energies, and it's unique because it's like I know from experience, like I ain't never seen no perfectly round stone before. Like what I do, they're special. It's like a 4-leaf clover. And so it's like I have all that, and I know it's literally like if there's such a thing as like creating something symbolically, this is going to be it is perfectly. And so I'll go and I'll meditate, or I'll sleep with it on my forehead, or I'll like, you know, put it under my pillow with the 100% knowing that whatever this is, this somehow interacts with me in another way.
Yes.
And like, you know, that would be constituted as nuts in like, you know, the way which people are taught to think in mainstream world. But like part of it is like we're all nuts, you know. If anything, I share that story to give permission slip, like, yeah, like you're nuts is just as nuts as this.
Yeah.
It's like this is what being human is, and being a magician is learning how to dance with the invisible. And like you do yours with your tarot cards and your storytelling. And it's like people do it with their music. People do it with like their cooking. People do it with like their relationships.
It's awesome. And if you ask people exactly how or why, I think most people are like, oh, fuck, I mean, shit. Like, there's so much actually that goes into it that, like, how would I ever explain exactly how or why? I can give you, like, the loose sort of outline, right? I can, like, give you a recipe that I wrote down or something, but it's not really going to explain that, like, if I smell a certain thing or, like, see it bubbling in a certain way, I'm going to do this other thing and, you know, like, respond in the moment. And so in those, like, types of ways when people are seeking sort of like, how do I do this thing that you're doing? I just kind of am like, you just have to start doing it. You just have to like do it. Like you just go do it. That's the only advice that you really can give, right? Because you have to, like you were saying earlier, you have to sort of like practice these things and make them a part of what you do and who you are for them to become really good tools for you, but also, you know, produce whatever it is that they need to produce in your life or in yourself.
Certainly. I would say though, because I like like I'm a knucklehead at the end of the day. Like I need like really, if it's like something like material in this world, like if I'm not given like very, very specific instructions, like I'm just going to go do about it my own sort of way. Which sometimes doesn't work out, but I need instructions. And so, it's from that perspective that like I like to share, you know, what seems to make sense to me. And so these are just instructions on ways which you do this. It begins internally, and it begins with your immediate life. It begins with like, you know, there's no like, well, if this was right or if that was the, no, it's like, it's exactly in front of you. And it is an internal posture. And then it is from there. And that internal posture ultimately could be boiled down to is like life is ceremony, which is the opposite of, if you don't do that, you're living more in mainstream world, which is life as occultic ritual.
And like
and
reaction,
so this
unconscious
like
reaction.
this is the same energy. And so the energy of life as ceremony is recognizing the significance, the meaning, what have you, like however deep you want to go with whatever you're doing, with what's right in front of you, with what's right in front of you. And that's how you create a different internal structure. And that is awareness. That's just paying attention. And it's like not an easy thing to do, but as you begin to do that, all of the other stuff begins to just crack away because you have mastered the art of awareness. And then the synchronicities, the knowing becomes clearer and clearer. Like that seems to be the story if you're paying attention. Like that's what's like right in front of you. That's what I'm experiencing. So it's like if you have those questions, like, well, what do I do? It's like it's just taking a different approach to life, like having some degree of meaning, like whether that is like a blessing before you eat, and recognizing like this is literally what's going in my physical body, or like, you know, any natural sort of thing which you do as a human, maybe getting like a deeper understanding of what's happening with that. And then it begins to create a greater awareness, and you're less and less connected with all of the other stuff, but you're still immensely present within life, because we don't want to become like not present in life.
No, we want to be ever present in life, more and more and more and more when possible. But I love that point that it is exactly where you are and with what you have around you, because I think there's this tendency for people when they're looking into I guess like spiritual sort of lifestyles, or possibly like this sort of new age sort of thing, or I guess I just feel like a lot of people are looking for some sort of escape from what they're experiencing or what they have, and which comes from a real need to change, you know, like you do want to escape. Wait, if you're in that sort of situation where you're looking to escape, like you do need to escape, but it's not usually like I think how people expect it to be. Like it's not this like, oh, you suddenly thought hard enough about a thing and then this like magical like you know, paradise opened up in front of you and it was super easy and you didn't have to work for it at all. And then, you know, unlike, it's weird because like what we're talking about is that things do just sort of open up and fall together. And but like you said at the beginning, it's not usually how you really like expect them to, you know, it's usually out of like left field and you're like, oh, what, like weird, but okay, like let's go see what that's all about. Go ahead.
And that's part of like the synchronicity just means you have awareness of things that are happening in life.
Yeah.
So whether you have an awareness of things lining up for you or not is just like, you know, that has nothing to do with whether they happen. It's just like whether you're aware enough to see it. And synchronicity is just like the like, oh, this is a time where I saw it happen or where it was particularly dramatic.
Yeah.
But there was a point. What did you said something which I wanted to respond to. It was
kind of expect like an escape and for just magical.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think though there's a truth to that. There's a real truth. So the lesson I think is more so this is, you know, it's if you're brought up in this culture, you've been, you know, all of these different like natural like weaknesses within human personality structure is weaponized to make as like intense as possible. So like that's me being as polite as possible, saying like everyone's really fucked up.
Yeah.
And because everyone's so fucked up, like you just think it's normal because it's like what you think is normal is just like fucked up. It's like the saying like it is no sign of good mental health to be well adjusted to a sick society. It's like, you know what? Everyone's fucked up. Yeah. So all right. So you got a fucked up person, but they sense something inside that like they know they're looking at it externally and they can see it so clearly in culture and they can be like, wow, culture's fucked up. I want to get out of that. And like there's this vision of this other like utopian sort of area to go there. but the truth of being human is like, if you don't work out your inner conflicts, which were caused by or at least they were intensified by the culture. Every culture does it one way or the other. It has to happen. Like, that's when you bring that toxicity into this like pristine environment, because it's with you. And so that's like why everyone kind of like rolls their eyes at these communities, because the truth of it is like, you got to work out your own inner conflicts.
Yes.
And that's the human experience. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's like whatever's coming up, like, you know, whatever shit's in your life, like that's what you have to like find the internal balance with.
Absolutely.
And the skill of doing that is how you actually then find and create that utopia that you already know. You just don't have the inner strength to hold that energy yet. And that's literally what we've been given the opportunity to face over these last 45 days or 60 days. Is like, everything has been boiled up in your life.
Yeah.
And like, it's different for you, different for me, different for everyone. And so it's like, whatever is coming up, it's like, yeah, like, you know, that's what you get to work with. And whatever degree it's coming up in is like, you know, that's kind of how you're working with it.
Yes. No, it's awesome. And it's like it's another aspect of that sort of duality or you know, opposition. That I just like make this shape because it was a shape that came up on that episode of the Mandorla, which was a word I never knew until that day, and it's like significant in my life now. But that sort of duality and heightened polarity, another aspect of it is exactly that you know, what the internal is opposite to the external, you know, and the individual is opposite to the sort of mass mind or the mass community, but at the same time, both of those things are the same thing. You know, the internal and the external are the same thing. The individual and the mass society are the same thing. And so when you're doing this sort of inner work and you're, you know, taking out all the sort of blockages and learning to hold ever higher energy on this plane, you're literally creating that in the world around you too. And I think that it's really, really hard for people to accept that that's an actual truth of reality, you know, and it's really hard for people to accept that like doing their internal work is actually affecting the entire world. And so, you know, when people ask me like, well, if we're not going to revolt and like tear shit down and burn everything up and create a new thing, like what are we going to do? I'm like, we're going to work on ourselves. Like we're going to like, you know, it sounds like some sort of like a cop out, or like it's not real, or like it's like love and light. And I'm like, no, it's like a legitimate actual, I mean, it's in like all these ancient traditions. It's like a hermetic principle. It's actually reality. But it just sounds so like froofy to people that they're like, yeah, whatever, you know, and they can move on. And it's like, fuck, that's the most important thing. Actually, I think it's like the thing to do is that.
And that's what's the two things I want to respond to in that. So it's like, first is what you're describing, this inner world is like astrologically, or within like most of the esoteric arts, like this is what water represents: the emotional world, the inner world, the imaginatory world, the dream world, like all of this sort of stuff. And so we know we're mostly water, and it's like it's esoterically like symbolic is water, the inner world. And like, yeah, that's what we're working at that level. And it's water that holds it all together. It's our water bodies. And so, and this is why I keep going back to the river and flowing water is like, it still comes down to like experience in the physical body, but recognizing it without getting lost in this like internal world, emotional body, and being able to interact with life in a physical way. And so what literally like water, like rivers and creeks and streams, like they are the symbol of like that, of at least the unfolding of life, and then the movement of water within ourselves. And so I like to, you know, I talk about the Susquehanna River, and there's another thing which I want to show you, because we talked about textures. And so right at the source of the river, like, let's see if I could show it on this map right here. Are you able to see this? Like right up underneath the A in Susquehanna.
Yes.
That's where Cooperstown, New York is. That's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. That's where, like, it's all this big theosophical symbol. It's like literally 150 feet away from the source of the river.
Wow.
This river is like the one of 5 rivers estimated to be more than 300 million years old. But also just about like 10 miles away from Cooperstown, in the same part of the world, and probably much, much closer, maybe a long time ago, is Herkimer, New York. So it's basically the same land. And what makes Herkimer, New York interesting is that there's a certain type of stone which is found there. And it naturally just shows itself throughout the rocks and streams. There's certain concentrations of it, certain degrees of expression. But like, here's an example of one of them right here. Can you see this?
Oh yeah, that's a Herkimer diamond.
So this is a Herkimer diamond.
Wow.
And so like, this is how it comes out of the earth, like with these like really strong facets and this water clarity, and it's got 2 points. And so this is there's maybe like one other place on earth where like this type of quartz, this double terminated water clarity quartz, is found. And so this is a marker it doesn't matter what culture you're from. Like if you're walking around and you see all of a sudden stones like this lying around, you'd be like, wow, there's something interesting going on here. And you're going to recognize that. And so this is a marker. The fact that this is found, whatever this means. And what's interesting is when you have a stone that shows itself in what we call a crystal, because there's quartz, which is not crystal, the molecules are literally just random. But when you have crystal formations, the molecules are arranged in very precise geometric patterns. Like there's something underlying happening. And crystals are used since their power is hijacked in high technology all the time, whether that's medical equipment, computer equipment, even timepiece. There's once a time we did not have time.
Yeah.
There's once a time people went through the day. I mean, I think about this all the time. There's once a time you didn't have stop signs.
Yeah.
What the hell would that be like? But anyway, this sits at the top of this river. Like, so when we begin, and this is a marker, this is just 10 miles away from this thing, which is, to me, like, it's the same backyard. This part of the world is marked as like something very, very significant. And so there's stories which are true about every piece of flowing water throughout this thing called Earth. And the more we understand it, the more we like find its literal treasures, and they're still readily available for us. That's a seemingly truth in this game which we're playing, that they're still in parks. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in military places you can't go to, but there's still places which you're able to go to, and there's still things you can find. And there's something that happens when you begin to understand the environment which you live in.
Yes. That's amazing too, because that shape is very similar to a mandola. That shape is just like an ellipses, basically. It's the vesica.
Yeah.
They have there the double pointed. I mean, I guess one is much more angular, but that's interesting to me too. Wow, and it makes me sad because we were supposed to have a meetup right now in that place, basically, right?
Yeah.
But I like to think that whatever was going to happen there is happening right now in this episode, and the people who are going to connect with, we're going to connect with that, are going to connect with this message that perhaps needed to get out, or experience that needed to be had. I like to think that.
I think it's I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
I think the answer to that is definitely yes. It's been strange, like, this time in I went through like one of the things that was most interesting about this time in the church is like re-examining things which I read years and years ago, and re-examining myself. Like, I'm seeing, and I think this is true for all of us. I mean, because all you have is your own story. So it's like you keep on like get the opportunity to re-examine different things. And so I've been re-examining things I've read and like, themes or what have you. And I'm looking at it. And there's and I'm seeing, where I've grown and where I haven't grown or where I've got more growth, and like, just like, recognizing this human thing, and then just kind of like, not caring anymore. That's been what my experience had been. And so the church was very much like, there was this time where I was really like, I was looking back at all of these things again. And then I got to this point where I'm like, it doesn't matter anymore. It's all done. And so I think that is very symbolic of like what also is what we're going through, and what is part of like this, like letting go of like first remembering whatever that story may be, and then letting it go to go and have this next expression. And so ever since like, the last 2 weeks, like I was supposed to have like 2 months worth of work in this church. Like, I was gonna, I had to get it ready. It's an enormous building to get ready for auction. And so I ended up like organizing over like 300 chairs and 200 tables, over 5,000 books, and like
Wow.
threw away like 2 huge dumpsters worth of trash. It was like probably about 30 different rooms. And they're like, they didn't think I was gonna do half of it, and they thought it would be 2 months. And like I did the whole thing in like 4 weeks. And because I was like really, really motivated to do this work, I was like, and it was easy, and it helped me like just like, I'm literally throwing away and organizing trash in a spiritual center's basement.
Yeah.
And then like as soon as I was like done that, I was like, I'm done all this other stuff, which I'm working on in myself too. And then I was like, I'm ready for this next chapter. And this is what I think the wave is. We're all kind of like working through individually and collectively, is like this, like we're re-examining old stuff to look at it, and then just to be done with it after some reorganization. And there's this next chapter, which is coming. And this is what it looks like what's literally the opportunities, like, the relationships which you're making right now, the whatever is like literally like the easiest next step. That's probably the best way of describing it. Like the easiest next step without knowing where it's going, as long as it's not counting on something else, on like, this false reality, being
Yeah.
able to recognize that at least.
I love it. It's interesting. It coincides with this other series of synchronicities to me, to think about it like that, like this clearing out of the sort of past in order to open up the future channel. They're all sort of connected in a circle.
Yeah.
If you have blockages in one, you're gonna have blockages in another.
Yeah, there's and like this is like a weird time. Like, it's like I think a lot of people are doing different things right now, or at least have the opportunity. And so that's part of it too, is like, is like the just like the whatever's going on in this environment, which they're trying to align 5G with, which they're trying to like all the other sort of stuff. There's something else going on too. And we're figuring out what to do with that. And there are all of these different people who are doing different things with it. And that's part of like this opportunity now too. But like you, I think it's for me, it's an inner experience, but immensely and intimately tied with the outer and the physical.
Amen. Yeah, and the more we can, I think, remember that and follow those synchronicities to sort of preparing the soil, so to speak, the better things will go. But I also don't. I hate to ever say anything that would make someone feel like they like aren't already doing what they need to be doing. Like
Yeah.
that, right? Like I don't want it to be this like, oh, you have to go, whatever. Like whatever you're doing is probably where you need to be and what you need to be doing, and maybe it needs to change. Whatever, everybody's different, but Yeah, no pressure, right? You're going to get there and you're going to find that it was perfect all along.
That is seemingly like what, like that's what like working with inner conflict is about. Like, you know, we're complex, we're very, very complex internally. And it can be there's a golden path within that, where like everything, like actually like it all lines up, but there's a whole bunch of other crap around it. And figuring out how you do that should feel it. There is no more inner conflict where it's like, am I working too hard, am I not working hard enough? It's like there's this desire to like want to work, and if it's not time to work, well, then you follow that too.
Yeah.
But it's like there's understanding what that is, and there should be a bit of tension there, but there should not be conflict.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's like easy to describe and hard to describe all at the exact same time. You know, because if you're absolutely doing nothing and you're sort of not taking responsibility for yourself, or not knowing that you know, do have sort of an internal world that you want to sort of get in order or whatever, then you're not doing it. But like to sit there and wonder, like, am I doing it good enough, or am I doing it in the right way, or like should I be doing this or that? It's like that's the type of thing where I think we need to sort of like let that go. Like, yeah, you are doing it in the right way. If you're doing it, you're doing it in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, that's 100% true. But it's also an art form. That's why I say it's a skill set. It's like um, physical expressions of this, as you were saying that. Like, I like to keep going back to the physical world. Like, look at look at a surfer. Look at like like a really good dancer. Look at like the squirrel. Have you ever seen the squirrel suit? Like the guys who jump down mountains in the squirrel fly suit?
Yes, that shit is
Like, you know,
rad.
look at that, like, you know, riding a unicycle, juggling, like, you know, all of these sort of things, which are just like, you know, this, if you're not doing it right, there's an obvious feedback loop, you know,
Yes.
but when you're doing it right, you're like, it looks effortless. And so like, that's a skill set. And so part of this is like, you know, it's learning to let go. It's like, you know, you can't describe riding a bike so much, but we're all doing it too.
Right. Exactly. Exactly that. You nailed it.
But I still think like, I think the expression of being physical is changing too, and I think that, you know, how weird can we go?
We should go as weird as we can, man.
So this isn't all theory. This is like physical sort of stuff, and this ultimately the only way you can live on Earth and be true and authentic is to be free and sovereign. And that's not like what that means, like, you know, this is where it gets weird. It's like, but it's not weird. We're just taught to think of it being weird. We should have the capability of being 100% self-sustainable. Maybe not 100%, but 100% at times. But like, you know, we have this dance between being physical and non-physical, and that's a skill set, and there are clues to this. And as I said before, like the environment's changing, weird things are changing. Like we're seeing different people here with different things. There's a way to hold the human physical form in a way which is different than what we think of as purely material.
Hmm.
And that is the capability, and a lot of it has to do with like how watery you're involved with, like, you know, as you know, to me it's like literally light, but it's like a fusing more so with like what we think of the physical skin with light, you know, that's how I'm envisioning it, rather than with water and emotion. That doesn't mean there isn't water and emotion. I'm just saying like now there's a greater instant, there's more of the what we'll call photons. They're not photons, but we're calling them photons. And it's like it is making this like this body that surrounds us. We live in a certain electromagnetic frequency where we just see this is what 3D is, this is what solid is, and what's slightly less solid we don't experience as real. But if you want to start experiencing it as real, you got to start like looking for it. And so like, and this is made up of photon, and you're pulling up your physical body, like it's not like an on off, it's a continuum. And as you do this, you have a different relationship. Like, I think that's happening. I think that's a skill set. I'm doing that, like, and I think like there's not one way to do it, but other than utilizing some degree of imagination, which is like inner vision, like picturing sort of thing, with breath work and movement and balance and grace. Like, however you do that, you do it, but it's all the same thing. And like, obviously like qigong and like forms of yoga and tai chi, or like, ballet, but ballet is not quite as spiritual, but you see it, but like that movement, but like, you know, any of those sort of inspired sort of things, the flow arts are phenomenal, just not without all of like the dark net to disconnect the folks,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah. What's interesting is earlier in the episode when you were talking about water, I was thinking about how, water is this sort of godlike eternal matrix or whatever. It's very feminine in a way. And then I was thinking, well, what's the masculine? And I was like, I wonder if light is the masculine. And then here you are describing, light, and how that's this sort of almost like the opposite end of the extremes of the mandorla. We have like light and water. And so
Yeah.
the point where those two merge, pretty cool to think about. And all of these ancient traditions have some aspect of what you're describing too. We have this sort of mental focus or acuity or presence at least, and then you have the physical actions as well to sort of bring those two in alignment is something very sacred. And then if you can infuse that with spirit and emotion and presence, then you've got the grand trinity going on.
And then you line it up with the unfolding of life through flowing water.
Yeah.
And then life unfolds, and you look at this as a ceremony. Like, how you live your life is like, that's it. Like, there's no like, well, I would do this if I were living like here. No, you do that like you're living now.
Yeah.
And it's like baby steps. And it's like, it's like, those are the questions I ask myself. It's like, I go down that sort of checklist. And so I think it's the only, it by default, like, there is no other way anyone can psychologically walk through what is happening to culture right now. The large scale psychological assault to the mainstream person's consciousness of 60 days of pandemic nonstop around the clock, and then instantaneously same degree of tension, just totally in a different place, but everything is opposite. That is like hardcore, like MK Ultra style. Like, you don't fuck with people that way, but that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's a mass programming.
But we're able to see that, and there's also an opportunity. There's an opportunity that's happening right now too.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, there's absolutely an opportunity, and we've seen, I think, a lot of people feel this and look at all of this tension, experience it, and sort of, it's almost like I was describing a while ago how there's this time in my life where everything was fucked at once. Like, every single aspect of my life was just like fucked. And I was like, I either totally give up, or I just say, okay, fucking whatever. And I let it go and just flow with it. And that's what I did. And it, everything works out, of course. And I feel like that's sort of what's happening to the mainstream mind at this point. It's like, you're either going to like continue just going along with it and getting fucked and just like everything's going to shatter and fall apart. It's going to be like mental trauma, emotional trauma, probably physical trauma along with it. Or you step back and go like, oh fuck no, I'm just going to flow a different way, dude. Like, I'm not doing that right now. And it's like you brought to the breaking point, and you're either going to like shatter, or you're going to like step back from it and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. So we see, I think, a lot of people are sort of like waking up in a way right now because of all of this, where they're like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. But there's just as many people, or way more, that are breaking down with it and allowing themselves to break down with it. And that's very sad.
Well, it's going to be interesting, because this is like, the book Power versus Force?
No.
So it was written in the 90s, and was like a really like that's considered like one of like the pioneer books of a certain school of thought. And it's talking about like in a very like metaphysical esoteric way, like the difference use of like personal will, like force versus power, which is kind of greater than that.
Yeah.
And it started, I believe the guy who wrote it, was he a chiropractor? Whether or not he was or not, he utilized what was called what do they call it? Oh, you worked at a chiropractor's office. So
Yeah.
the kinetic, the testing, you know, the testing with the arm,
Oh yeah, yeah. Muscle testing, I
the
think.
muscle testing. So he utilizes the muscle testing, like tests thousands of people and calibrated all of these words and feelings. And like he wrote this book about power and force, and like it calibrates, like, you know, this emotion is above this emotion, and there's a number to it. And he says, and there's consciousness which can be calibrated as well. And he says certain people at certain consciousnesses like calibrated a certain level, and like it describes like how they think and how they see life and how they experience life.
Interesting.
And there is this ratio between like, you know, the higher up in consciousness an individual can be in terms of expressing life, the more they counterbalance like low level consciousness, like anything below 200, if I recall correctly, like 200 is is like where it's considered like depressing death consciousness, shame being the very lowest of emotions, and then whatever the highest was, I think it went up to like 800 maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so it's like as it would go up there, like one person would counterbalance like hundreds or thousands of other individuals, even millions. So to your point, and to like this stretch out, it's like, and even to that, like, I don't want to give up. Like, I want to stay around till the last one wakes up. Like, you know, as more and more people, I think, are like waking up and expanding their consciousness, like going through the narrative, like going through the conspiracy, going through the personal stuff. And like, you know, it's all a continuum. They're also counterbalancing all of the stuff of the people who are getting deeper and deeper into the story. Like, you know, I gauge it by the number of like the percentage of cars I see people driving with masks.
Yeah.
Like if you're driving around with a mask and you're the only one in the car, it's like, I know you're at a certain level of consciousness where that level of reality makes sense. It's like, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's a fascinating point to make, and it's interesting to see it like verified in this way that you're describing by this chiropractor or whatever. Someone in the chat says that it's Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. And it reminds me of the idea in the Kali Yuga. The first time I ever encountered the idea of yugas was, I mean, the internet was fresh. So it was like 90 something, you know, like 97, let's say, or something. And it was just a random like page I stumbled onto. And I had a list of all these characteristics of the Dark Age that were going to be true, you know, that were written thousands and thousands of years ago in these books. And so I'm looking at them and they're all true right then. It's like food will be available packaged in a store. And it's like, how did they fucking know that back then? So I was like, dude, we're living in a dark age. Like, this is one of my earliest moments of like, holy shit, what's going on this fucking plane? But one of the ideas that I loved and I've always held on to from that site, whatever it was in that day, was this idea that in the Kali Yuga, as bad as things are going to get, as sort of inverted as they're going to get, as sort of constricted and like painful and full of suffering, whatever, delusional, all these things, one idea even of the light will, you know, discount 1,000 darknesses, basically. Like you can pull in one little moment of awakening, it'll like shoot out into the, you know, way more powerful than it would have been in a golden age. So I was like, well, this is really like at some, you know, everything has balance, right? Balance in all things. And so this is the balance in the dark age, is that just a little tiny bit of goodness will dispel however many evils. And so what you're describing is like that exact concept, but in a very different way. Well, but it's the same thing.
I mean, that's what all of the books are about. They're describing like this cycle of death and rebirth, and everything we see is in the physical world, and the inner world is like that process. Like you see it in the seasons, you see it in the day, you see it, like there's a truth to that. And so, but and recognizing like that's it, that's the game. And like, as you know that, like, it's there's gonna be something on the other side.
Yes. Yes. And it's all in continuity. It's all in perfect balance. Well, wow. We've had quite a discussion so far. I don't know where else we might want to go with it before we bring things to a close.
uh you tell me, anything cultural?
I mean, I'm not really I'm the person people are like, "Oh yeah, that thing." And I'm like, "Huh? What thing?" Like I'm not in connection with
So
much.
this is what I'm finding like interesting, like as it relates to I so one of the things which has happened since I've been in the church is I've probably reduced the amount of like like news information by 85 to 90%,
Which is probably awesome.
which is good, which is good. But the thing which kind of captures my attention is uh the pulling down of statues and how that is passed through.
Oh yeah.
Um, do you remember when there was what were they calling the Arab Spring?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what? When was that? Do you even know when that was?
I do because I was living in the Middle East during it, and it was 2011, 10, 11, 10.
2011.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember like watching the videos of like the tearing down of the statues. And I'm watching, and it's like, like I know I saw that, like these eyes saw it, it's in this consciousness. And now I watch these videos like of that, or like pictures of that happening in the United States. And I'm like, this is the same thing. Like maybe it's the same video. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like it's the same archetype which is being presented. I'm like, okay, this is it. And then I saw that in a very, very small way, in a very small way, happen within like a small local town. And I'm thinking about how that has gone from like this idea across like, the oceans, and then it like went locally, and all this is being told in context of a story through the computer. And then it's actually now manifesting in a way which is undeniable. It's the same archetypical expression. Like I'm seeing it now happening with my physical eyes.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't even.
Yeah.
It's hard too because with all of this stuff, I'm like, I was there. Like, I feel like I'm like reliving my youth, but I'm watching it not as a youth. And I'm like, I get the sentiment and I understand what you're fighting against. And I understand why, it feels like this is the right thing to do. But I'm also standing in a place now where I'm like, this is not going to help anything. Like, I don't know. Like, I was there. I get it. I'm not. And people
Yeah.
come at it like, if you're not with them, you just don't get it. You haven't been schooled enough. You haven't learned enough. You haven't read enough. Because otherwise, if you had, you'd be there. And it's like, well, no, actually, what's happening is I've read even more. I've lived even more. And I've thought even more. And I came away from that because of all the things I've lived and read and thought about since then. Like, I was there. I was at the place where I was like, let's rip down all the statues and burn all this shit down and fuck the police and like all this stuff. But you can't explain that to somebody who's in it and going through it, just like no one could explain it to me when I was in it and going through it. And so it's just like, I just watch and I'm just sad because, I'm like, well, you could be creating something amazing and instead you're just raging against something and destroying something, which may or may not be amazing, but you're still just destroying. You're not creating anything.
I would suggest like you are in a very, very, very small group of humans across the earth that have real world like perspective, like particularly like a Westerner's perspective. Like you explain a story from someone who was raised in the United States, right? That's the nature of like being shaped by culture. But you have firsthand experience of what that looked like in another culture.
True.
And you also have the knowledge to go and compare that to history and how things like are manipulated. Like if you think about like each one of those is like, you know, there's a small group, that's a small group, that's a small group.
True.
And you are this like Venn diagram of all of
Right in
those.
the
Like
center.
your perspective, your voice is like it carries a lot of weight. Like you offer a lot of perspective,
Well, thank
which
you.
is like, I mean, I'm encouraging you to go and like share that, like like start your position with like, let me tell you where I'm coming from, like, because there's a truth to that. You're probably right that the people who are deep into this, that it doesn't mean anything, but there are people who are
Watching.
not so deep.
True. That's true. Because
And there are people who could go that way. And if they see something like that's who your audience is, who that message would resonate and offer like real value.
That's a really good point. And I do try, I get kind of caught up because a lot of the people who I'm trying to offer this perspective to, who are kind of caught up in it, are people who I actually know in real life, you know, who I've loved in real life and hugged in real life. And then I start talking about this stuff and they call me a white supremacist. And I'm like, oh, well, fuck. I mean, like, at some level, as detached as I want to be from that, and as much as I understand that where it's coming from, I'm also like, well, now my feelings are hurt, so I don't know if we can really talk anymore, you know, or they unfriend me or block me, or, you know, in real life stop taking my calls, and it's like, okay, then I guess, like, goodbye. I don't know, you know, but yeah, I think
that's you know, we're blending now two different ideas here, because when you add that into like personal journey perspective, like there's one thing of like writing that story down and having that, like, you know, read by thousands of people, and there's another, like, you know, let me share this information to those people who I'm close with. Like, you know, there's a different quality to each one of those. So you could, that's definitely that adds to the experience and the ball game and what's going on considerably.
I really I was talking with my guy Johnny about it yesterday or the day before, and we were talking about how it'd be interesting too to write it out as an exploration of how few people are actually going into any of this with the intent to think, you know, and that instead we've been somehow programmed really, really well in the past, I don't know, 10, 20, 500, however many years, to turn thinking off and turn emotion up and just react and not, you know, respond, to just react. And we're very reactionary, and we're very sure of ourselves, and we have no interest in, you know, taking in new perspectives or data because we've just already classified it and judged it as whatever we've classified it and judged it at, and so now it's over there and we don't need to look at it ever again. And you know, exploring this sort of like lack of thinking. We don't really think. I mean, some of us do, and the people I think who are involved in this community think a lot, and that's awesome. But past that, it's hard to find people who are actively thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hold the inner posture of wanting to wait for the last person to become enlightened. I hold this story. I'm like, now's the time. Like, I'm very interested in uncovering and discovering what are the actual techniques to navigate through this time, to develop like in a very, very real material sense, a different way of experiencing life. Like, I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in people, like, you know, trying to convince people of that. Like,
Saving
people
everyone.
understand there's a truth to that or they don't. So I'm not, but I do have a great deal of understanding and compassion of where these people are. And, you know, probably you know, it's affecting all of us. And the question I have is this: it's like, when all of the virus stuff started, did the rollout of the 5G antennas across North America stop, or were they affected by any stretch of the imagination?
Oh, didn't they heighten? Didn't they do it faster?
Like,
yeah.
I don't know, because I know before that was probably the topic I was following closest.
Yeah.
And now I don't know, like, where I would get that information, like no longer is talking about that. They're talking about like, COVID, like, and the question I have is like, my sense is like, no, I don't think that stopped. I think, as you said, it intensified, and there's no talk on like, now that's live. How's that affecting populations?
Yeah. Well, that's part
Like,
of what I wonder is going
like
on.
it's like when you see people who can't wake up, it's like, part of it is they can't help it. Possibly. I don't know if that's the case, but it makes the most amount of sense. And it's you go and you look at emojis. Like, emojis literally give a real-time feedback loop by every way you could slice and dice the demographics. You could do it geographically, you could do it by age, you can do it by sex, you could do it by any way which they have you divided up. Like, there are 5,000 data points they tell us from like the Cambridge Analytica stuff. So it's like there are 5,000 ways to group people. There are infinite ways to group people, and they can get a real-time understanding of what is the emotional temperature of that group. And because there's historical data, they can get an understanding of like, how it has been. Like, there's infinite ways of like getting insight into that. And that's why I'm saying, like, this could all just be an experiment, because the degree of control which is seemingly capable, like, without any stretch of the imagination. That just makes sense. Of course, they're using emojis for that. Yeah, this is seemingly going on.
This is amazing to think about too, because I'm like one of the people who I think misuses emojis somewhat. Like, I don't know what that is about me, but I'm like, here's this emoji, and then people are like, what? You're like angry right now? I'm like, no, I was like being sarcastic or so, like, I feel like other people have this like easy way, they can use it and everybody knows what they mean, and I tend to use them and people are kind of like, I don't know, she's weird. So like I like to think I'm like a spanner in the works in that way, but I also want to now intentionally use really weird emojis at really weird times just to like fuck up the algorithm. Like, fuck them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the truth is, like, as you bring like a degree, that's the power versus force. Like, as someone is on a certain level of consciousness, then whatever they're interacting with, they're counterbalancing, whatever would be the mathematical resonant equivalent of that higher consciousness. And so, like, if you go and you do that in emojis, or you do it like in whatever way you're interacting with life, you are going to bring that level, and it's going to go and counterbalance a whole bunch of
darkness or whatever is counterbalancing
of robo sapiens.
Yes, undo the roboticness.
I mean, that's what's unfortunately happened.
Yeah,
not for everyone, but you see it.
If you're programmable and you're responding to stimulus in a pre-programmed way, then you're already right.
It's designed. Yeah. It's designed that way. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like there was an entire episode we did a while ago that, we were talking about that exact thing, that humans, for whatever reason, are highly programmable creatures. Unless, I think, you're very aware and present and conscious of what you're doing and why you're doing it, but not as like a given, as like each moment you're deciding like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It changes every single moment. And I'm always going to be
yes. There's a higher expression of that capability, and and that's how it's been used in a way which has been anti-human. That's what I call if we look at like all of the beings that are in bodies like this, Homo sapiens, and culture has taught us to divide that entire group of Homo sapiens by certain like vertical division points, like by gender, by race, by religion, all of these sort of things. But the truth is, it should be divided horizontally. And it's those that are human beings and those that are demonically possessed.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell demonically possessed is, like, every culture talks about it. It's like and this is what demonic means: anti-human.
Yeah.
They do things, they believe things, they act in things that are that are anti-human.
Yes.
And it's very possible, and it certainly seems that this demonic, archonic, Watiko, whatever you want to call it, like, it doesn't, it's non-physical.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and like that's the way we need to divide. And certain people like are completely possessed. These are the people behind war and behind all the like sick stuff. Those, like, that is not human.
Bill
That is
Gates.
not human.
Yes.
What?
I said Bill Gates.
Yeah, exactly. That's not human. Um, and then you have, like, stuff that is like, we're in a culture where, like, even if those that are not possessed, they're always getting whispers, demonic whispers, anti-human whispers.
Yes. Yeah, and it comes in many forms, whether it's temptation or, sudden urges or ideas that are like, wait, where did that come from? Or all kinds of ways I think that it can affect you. But it made me think, I was just watching, of this Chud, whatever we're calling Chop, the autonomous zone in Seattle, so-called. I look at that and I'm sitting there thinking, like, one of the things that I think the people who are doing this, who maybe are very well-intentioned people who actually believe that this is the best way to create a new society, and I totally get that. I would have been there in my 20s and whatever, I would have been like wholeheartedly like building this thing that they're trying to build. But now I look at it and I'm like, all the demons in that area are going to rush to that place now, because there's no order. There's no, set, I don't know. There has to be some sort of structure to sort of like, we help each other to some level. I'm not saying this system we've built is the best one, or that it's not enabling demons also, but in a very different way, suddenly removing all of that and just being like free for all and loose is they're all like rushing to it. So I'm watching these videos of it and I'm like, there's one. And you don't always like see, it's not always that obvious, but you just know like that created this vacuum and they came to fill it and things started going poorly. And, like, I guess it's a learning experience that you have to have really strong boundaries, and I think that's part of this experience too, of living, is really understanding that you have to choose your boundaries and you have to strongly carve them out, possibly over and over and over again, because there's always going to be something that is, if you don't, invading that and, sharing your space with you, and maybe that's not what you want. And I think it's like this very hard lesson for people to learn, that you do need these very strong boundaries. I think it feels like force to people, and it's not. It's just defining yourself and differentiating yourself from everything else that there is. And I don't know, maybe I think some people look down on it or think it's a negative thing, but I think it's one of the most important things.
Boundaries are, I would agree with you completely. I would agree that it's one of the, it's, and this will probably be a nice way to wrap this up, is as we were talking about in the beginning of the show. What were we saying in the beginning of the show? Because I just lost it for a second. So what was it? It was
texture and dragon eyes and creating.
No, what you said it just a minute ago. It reminded me of the beginning of the show. You were saying
that when I was 20, I would do this.
No, it'll come back to me in a moment. So it was we were talking about the oh, this is what. So the Chad zones, the Chud zones. What do you call them?
Chud is what Jay called them. Jay Ritchie called them.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. That was a movie when I was growing up. Chud. Yes. So these zones, as you were saying, they were built upon for some of the people, like from a very good place and a truth place. And this is just like you were saying in the beginning of the show about like, this utopian society, like this desire for like this utopian, but it never works out. Right. And the reason why it doesn't work out is because the inner work is not done. The inner conflict is not destroyed. And so that is what happens. But then that's also where, you get to the right spot, is like, there is a drive to want to do away with all of the authority, but you're going to reap what you sow. You're going to get what you get if you do not first work on that inner self. And that's what we're going to see. And it's like, you can't control other people. All you can control is your own. And that's how you navigate around that whole sort of the demonic, chaotic sort of energy at this time.
Yeah, well, that exact thing, right? You want to get rid of all this authority. Well, fine, do it, but then you are the authority, and if you're not ready to be it, then like shit's gonna go wrong. You know, someone has to be the boundary maker and the holder of the line, because that's a thing that we need, you know, for ourselves at every level of being. So you better be ready to do that. And it's sad because a lot of people are like, just let people go, just let them like figure out how to be an authority. I'm like, well, not everyone's there yet, and that's why we have people in our society who have agreed to help us hold different various lines in various ways. You know, we decided this as a community because there's children and there's elderly people, there's all kinds of people who need various things, and so we take care of each other, you know. But yeah, if you want to get rid of all of that, then just be ready to be all of that for yourself, which is totally cool, and I totally support it. I just don't necessarily think all the people in Chud are that are ready for that. So I think we've covered everything we can.
I think we covered it all for today.
And I always like to ask, of course, how people can then connect with you further, or what things you have upcoming that you want to maybe share with people, or how you would like to best interact with people.
Probably the most amount of content right now is coming out on the YouTube channel, Susquehanna Alchemy, Instagram, Susquehanna Alchemy, or you know, you go to susquehannaalchemy.com. And like there's all sorts of different stuff you'll find there. You might find some really interesting stuff there as well.
Awesome stuff. I highly recommend exploring all aspects of what you've got going on. It's cool. Good stuff. And are you back to doing vision boards? That's not what they're called.
The starboards? I'm still not doing any starboards.
You're not doing them?
No, I do a starboard light, which is like not the full thing. I'm just doing the starboard light right now. The full starboards, it requires too much right now.
Right. I totally understand. But get a starboard light even is awesome if you want, because they're really, really cool. So then what are your final words of wisdom you want to leave people with, or ideas you want to leave in their mind as we wrap up?
Well, I want to be encouraging of like, you know, if you're watching this show and you're living in this time and you have, you know, the degree of awareness, which you do, it's like, you know, all right, we're all figuring this out, you know, and an encouragement to continue to keep, you know, taking the next right step. You know, the next step should be obvious what your next step should be, and not really, you know, you can't know what's in front. That is unknown for everyone. So it's and you know, it is an inside job.
Yeah.
You know, it is an inside job.
It's true. Never stop moving. Well, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom according to Michael Wann. Michael, thank you so much for coming back again for the 10th or 11th time or whatever this is. It's awesome to have you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Well, mega retrogrades might pull all kinds of energies around us and within us, and each of our unique stations in life will be affected differently. Massive social movements may be constructed and guided to illogical ends around us, and each of our unique stations in life will be affected differently. Fake-ass pandemics might arise and seem to take out many as they roll through, and each of our unique stations in life will be affected differently. No matter where you are in the world, and no matter what is happening around you, and no matter which unseen influences are pulling you this way or that, you are allowed to experience it as you do, respond to it as you like, and navigate through it as you will. No matter how you present yourself in these times, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
Nasty motherfuckers with a hook and a sickle. Brought to you advertisement, bone-plated nickel. Fire rate automatic smash from the get-go. Snack on the whack, fermented flesh disco. Abracadabra, archaic altars don't slabber. Hey, making jabbers with reality backwards. Hunting rap nerds, bodyguard collected actors. Munitions are famished, let them feast upon the dapper. Bloody bibs and muddy kicks, feast resting on amygdalas. Iron fist, tyrant shit, APO will rip you up. The rhyme rainmaker, Bane style backbreaker. Genghis-Khan depleted uranium satellite lasers. Cloaked in anonymity, I know you never heard of me. No rusted tools used for Crowley style surgery.
Dissect a whole sect, God body. God taught me to dissect the whole body. When it gets sloppy, I'ma get there. Rhymes rare like steak, get crushed like crates to create 52 states. And it's Baghdad, dusted towels, no rags. Straight melt dash, dust that. Niggas perkin', it's on purpose. My service touches the sun's surface, and rainbows touch serpents. My light all night shines so bright. I'm a star for eons, Hollywood's for peons, cause they try to copy the same shit we on. Hey, I ain't done yet, lungs depleted and can't breathe, can't believe it. Trying to seek it while trying to peep it, it's a secret. Now you're nobody, label somebody. Trying to claim John Gotti, it's yours truly, God body.